I've been shooting concerts for over 5 years now, and as I'm getting older, I'm starting to realize that I'm not going to do that for the rest of my life. But in those 5 years, what started as a photography only gig slowly turned into a photo and video gig, and then even reached the point where video was more requested than photo by my clients and their managers. And that is why in this video, I'm going to share 6 essential tips that I've compiled on how you can shoot better concert videos and raw clips to help you stand out from the increasing competition that is music videography. What I personally really love about filming artists and festivals is that you only have one shot to capture a moment. You have to time your shots so perfectly, and the feeling you get when you capture a moment that's never going to happen again is unreal. And I hope to inspire some newer, younger creatives out there to follow this amazing side hustle or career path that has taken me on crazy adventures and given me opportunities that I never could have imagined was possible. Now for tip number 1, which frame rate should you be filming in? Even if you've heard of frame rate, it can be hard to be sure which choice is best for your videos. After all, there's so many factors to consider when choosing a frame rate for your videos. In most cases though, you'll be shooting your concert videos in 24 frames per second, which basically means each second of video shows 24 still images. That specific speed tricks your brain into perceiving smooth motion, which is why 24 frames per second is the best frame rate for raw clips, and essentially any footage that you want to film in real time or normal speed. Real time is great when you want to show the energy on stage or in the crowd. By shooting at normal speed or 24 frames per second, your viewers and the fans of the artists you're filming get a better understanding of what that concert felt like. But what about slow motion? Slow motion is possible if you shoot in any frame rate option that's higher than 24 frames per second, like 30, 60, and 120 frames per second. The higher the frames per second, the slower you can make your footage. And here's how slow each of the following frame rates can go when you're editing the footage in your editing software. Unlike shooting raw clips, which are best watched in real time, shooting in a higher FPS for the purpose of slow motion is best for after movies and recap videos. Slow motion can make an epic moment last so much longer, and really is the king of after movies or creating epic segments in your videos in general. Now for the second tip I'd like to discuss, the 180-degree rule and hybrid shooting. In a lot of cases when you're hired to shoot an artist, you're going to be hired to shoot video and photo, aka hybrid shooting. In these cases, you need to understand the importance of each setting that you're using and changing when you switch between photo, video, normal speed, and slow motion. That's where the 180-degree rule comes in. To understand the 180-degree rule, you need to have a fundamental understanding of both frame rates and shutter speed. We've already talked about frame rates, and to quickly explain shutter speed, it controls how much light hits the sensor of the camera per second. So you'll see settings like 1/50th of a second and 1/200th of a second. With the footage getting brighter, the slower the shutter speed is, and with the footage getting darker, the faster the shutter speed is. Now with a better understanding of how frame rate and shutter speed work separately, the 180-degree rule will start to make a lot more sense. Here's how it works. If you're wondering what your shutter speed should be when you're out shooting video, all you have to do is take your frame rate and then double it, and that's going to be the correct shutter speed. So for example, if you're shooting a raw clip of an artist in 24 frames per second, the closest shutter speed we can get to that is 1/50th of a second. Since I've never used a camera that had 1/48th as a shutter speed option. If you're shooting in 30 frames per second, your shutter speed should be 1/60th of a second. 60 frames per second will have a shutter speed of 1/125th of a second. And then of course 120 frames per second will have a shutter speed of 1/250th of a second. Now why is this the rule we have to follow? Well, it's been established to give the most natural looking motion blur, like this clip that was shot in 24 frames per second with a shutter speed of 1/50th. So you have a perfect example right here. Now I can't move forward without explaining how hybrid shooting comes into play here. And if you're hired to shoot both video and photo, which settings should you be focusing on? Here's the order that I believe works best. First, determine your frame rate before you begin shooting. If for any reason you change your frame rate in the middle of your video shoot, keep in mind that this requires your shutter speed to be changed as well. Frame rate will not impact any of your photo shooting. Next, set your shutter speed to the 180-degree rule, aka double what your frame rate is. This is only if you're shooting video. If you're shooting photo, disregard frame rate and set your shutter speed for your desired look. I have a photography for beginners video linked in my description if you need to understand shutter speed for photography. But I do want to mention that if you switch from shooting photos to video and accidentally leave your shutter speed set to anything other than double your frame rate, the motion blur results may end up blurry or jittery. So be hyper aware of the 180-degree rule when you're hybrid shooting. Since these last 2 tips were really information heavy, I'll reiterate the main points one last time. 24 frames per second is for real-time, normal speed shooting. Any frame frame rate higher than 24 frames per second can be used for slow motion. When shooting video, follow the 180-degree rule when wondering what to set your shutter speed to. It's going to be double your frame rate or whatever the closest option is. If you're shooting photo, disregard frame rate completely, but ensure that you revert your shutter speed back to the 180-degree rule before recording video again. Lastly, I gotta mention aperture and ISO, which affect photo and video more or less the same and can be focused on after frame rate and shutter speed. Okay, for tip number 3, we're gonna move forward with something less complicated, capturing audio. 50% of video is audio, so if you get this part wrong, you're going to be in a bit of trouble. And generally speaking, the built-in microphone on your camera just won't cut it at these super loud shows and festivals. So it's definitely worth investing in an external microphone like my Rode VideoMic Pro Plus. I've added a link to this exact mic in the description below. I highly recommend getting it for your concert videography. Now, I've said this in a couple of my videos already, but a pro tip that will save you when you're recording live real-time audio at a show with a louder genre like dubstep, for example, is to set your mic to -10 decibels so your audio doesn't sound like this upcoming video. Wait for the drop. For clips that you've captured in slow motion, or for the purpose of after movies or recap videos, you most likely will use a song from the artist that you're shooting. If you post the video on your own social media like Instagram or YouTube, just make sure to do research on licensing and copyright to ensure that your video doesn't get striked or taken down, which has happened to me on Instagram before. Now, while staying on the topic of gear, my 4th tip is to shoot with a fast lens. Now, a fast lens means a low aperture number, which means it'll have a shallow depth of field, but more importantly, it's gonna let a lot of light into the lens. Shooting artists and festivals is a very different style than other types of video shooting because you don't really have any control over the lighting or anything else for that matter. Having a lens with a fast aperture like f2.8 means that even if the lighting isn't the best, you're still going to be able to capture at least a decent video with the lighting that's able to enter your camera. Now, my personal recommendation is you want a lens that's at least f2.8 or faster. Rent the lenses if you have to, but I will say that I have filmed artists with an f4 lens before and it treated me well with really no complaints. If you're looking for recommendations on lenses, I'll link some of my favorite lenses that I've used in the description below. My 5th tip is to over communicate with a client, whether it's the artist or their manager, especially on the day of the shoot. I cannot stress that enough because that makes the difference between a good client relationship and a passive one. Ask your client about when the big moments in their performance will be. Do they prefer vertical or horizontal video? Do they want the videos to be raw straight out of the camera or edited? And you'll have different artists wanting completely different things. Some will want you to stand still without shaking the camera, and some will want a lot more movement, while the rest won't really care at all. In any case, it's really important to have a really strong and direct communication with the artist you work with so that there are no surprises. I usually do this when I first officially meet the artists in the green rooms. I can guarantee you that they will always appreciate you asking and checking in. The 6th and final tip is kind of a challenge, and it's to make your viewers and the artist's fans watch the entire video. And there's a lot of ways you can achieve that, and my best tip is to actually make your raw clips as short as possible. I recommend trimming out the fat at the beginning and ends of your raw clips and ensuring that your video is no longer than 1 minute long. By doing this, you get to make sure that the viewers get to see the song or moment in its entirety with all of the unnecessary fluff removed. And that's good because the more the viewers get to see, the higher the chances that they will buy a ticket to see that artist or to attend that festival. So make sure your videos are as short as possible. That's all 6 tips. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. And if you use Adobe Premiere Pro and are looking to learn how to edit your artist's raw clips, continue on to this video on the screen now. I'll see you there.